The first session of the beginner's sewing course will teach you about sewing machines, how to wind bobbins and thread up. Then we'll conclude by sewing a small seam. So first of all, the parts of the sewing machine vary greatly between different machines as to where they are and what they do, but in general you have your basic mechanical sewing machine like this one, or you have the digital machines with the push buttons and flashy lights. Doesn't really matter which one you have, they all do the same job. The digital ones can be a bit more complicated to learn on and obviously offer far more features going forward. First of all, we have the stitch setting, the stitch type dial here, and these numbers refer to the stitches along the top here in orange, which are numbered 1 to 9. We also have a second set of stitches marked in white here, again marked 1 to 9, and you select the stitches by just turning this dial. So it gives you a nice satisfying clunk, you know when you've got the right stitch. So on this machine here, the straight stitch is number 1. The second dial down is the stitch length, and you can tell the stitch length dial because it will always have this symbol here with the 3 dotted lines increasing in size. So wherever that dial appears on your machine, that's what it will do, and the general range is from 0 to 4, and that means millimeters. So it's quite easy to remember. The longer the stitch length, the larger the number. We have a reverse lever here. Again, all machines will have a reverse lever, and it's marked by an arrow that turns back on itself like a U-turn, and that is operated by holding it down. So as long as you're holding the lever down, the machine will be sewing in reverse. This dial here is the stitch width, and that applies whenever you have any zigzag stitches which require the needle to move sideways from left to right. Then it's the width of that stitch which is controlled by this dial. While this particular machine is sewing on straight stitch, we want the dial to be at number 5, unless you want to move the needle position, which we'll talk about later. Now we come to the operational part of the machine, okay, the dangerous part. So the metal part here is called the needle plate, sometimes called the throat plate, and this area of the machine here is referred to as the throat. We have the presser foot here, and this is raised and lowered with a lever under the machine. Sometimes they're round the back, sometimes they're more here, sometimes they're right on the left side of the machine. And it's by lowering the foot onto the fabric which allows the machine to grip the fabric and pull it through as it's sewing. So when you raise the presser foot, you'll see there's this row of little jaggy teeth. These are called feed dogs, and it's the feed dogs which grip the fabric and pull it through as you're sewing. Now we have the bobbin cover here, which pops off using this lever, and if you've got a drop-in bobbin style of machine, sometimes called a top-loading machine, it'll look very similar to this. The other type of machine you get has a front-loading bobbin. So the first thing people tell me is, oh, I'm frightened of sewing machines. And mainly that's because they feel that sewing machines go too fast and they run away from them. Well, if you drive a car, sewing is exactly like driving a car. So the machine will go at the speed that you tell it to. And it depends on how hard you press the foot pedal. If you press lightly, it'll go slowly. So the trick is to learn the skill of controlling the speed of the machine. So first of all, I'd like you to switch the machine on and just press the foot pedal to find out how hard you need to press to make the machine go very quickly, and then ease off. So we'll start off by going pretty fast, then just ease off a little bit and the machine will slow down, and then a little bit harder. So play with that for a few minutes until you feel comfortable, and you should just be able to get the machine to either do a single stitch or to operate smoothly but slowly. And then speed up a little bit and slow down and speed up and slow down. And that's the level of control that you need to have over a sewing machine. And it's all done with the foot, which of course leaves your hands free for moving the fabric. So spend a few minutes until you feel that you can comfortably do that. And with that comes a confidence that you will be able to have control over the machine. Don't let it control you. So the next thing people tell me is that, well, I can't sew a straight line. So I'm going to show you now how to sew a straight line. So if you look at your machine needle plate, you'll see that there are markings on the needle plate. There are lines engraved on it, and on those lines there are numbers. So there's two sets of numbers here. We have the metric numbers in millimetres. So we've got a 0, a 10, a 15, a 20. Then we have fractions. So ignore the fractions, those are the old imperial measurements. We're going to be working in metric. So the 15, or 1.5 centimetres, is the standard seam allowance used by most dressmaking patterns. And that gives you a decent seam allowance which is strong enough that the garment isn't going to fall apart, yet it's not too wasteful in fabric, but it also gives you enough allowance to let the garment out a little if you need to. And the seam allowance means the distance from the edge of the fabric to where it's stitched. So I'm going to show you now how to sew a perfect 15mm seam allowance. So the tip is not to watch what the needle's doing, but to watch the edge of your fabric. So first of all, before we start threading the machine up, winding bobbins and using fabric, I'm going to ask you to practice on a piece of paper. So just get yourself any piece of paper with a straight line, because fabric doesn't have markings on it that you can follow. So what you need to train yourself to do is to follow the fabric edge. So I'm going to ask you now to pop the paper into the machine, line it up with the 15 line and pop the presser foot down. Then, keeping your eye on this edge round about here, your eye should be following this line and looking up towards the 15 line all the time. Now if you keep your hands slightly under the paper, okay, you don't need to grip the paper or grab it or hold it at all, just lightly hold it and the machine will take it from you. All you need to do is keep this edge straight. stop when you come to the edge of the paper, and there is your straight line. So I'd like you to now spend a few minutes using different lines. You can even use the edge of the presser foot as your guide, and just practice that until it becomes natural feeling. It should be, you shouldn't have to think about it. So just pop it in. And stitch away. And stop when you get to the edge of your paper. Okay. Now remember, in addition to the lines that you have marked here or the presser foot, if for some reason you did need a wide seam allowance, there's other lines we can use. This little line here where the metal meets the plastic edge of the bobbin cover. We have this edge here. We even have this little switch here which opens the bobbin cover. Anything here we can use as a line should we need it. But the general main ones are your 5, 10, 15 millimeters. So if you practice those ones, try and teach your eye to recognise which is which.